There is a worrying rise in reported cases during the just ended festive season. We're seeing women and children disproportionately affected by the various forms of violation, as well as such as domestic abuse, such as sexual harassment, as opposed to their male counterparts. Now, there has been a strengthening of legal frameworks, promotion of public awareness, and those things are critical. But at the numbers that we are seeing here today, or at the stories that we are receiving here today, there remains a concern. So this afternoon, the Minister of Youth and Gender Affairs, Mr. Lesego Chombo, joins us here in studio to discuss the ministry's strategy, or perhaps what efforts, collaborative or singular, the ministry is engaged with in response to this. Let me just take this time to thank you for your time for coming through, Honourable Minister. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure. Right. So, what a time. We saw your statement this morning as in your position in response to this very palpable state of a state of concern as concerns gender-based violence. I want to start there. Give this audience, the audience of VTV News, the opportunity to share what a message you took out today.
Ke dumedise Botswana khange ya khokhontsho ya bong maybe le ka tautuna bua re bitse khang ya khokhontsho.
Right.
Ka gore we stand against all forms of violence, gender and otherwise. It's very sensitive, like you said, but one thing that we can note about it ke gore e personally. It is very intrusive into our personal spaces. Like you mentioned just when you opened earlier on, it affects mostly women and children disproportionately. And it goes on to also be reflected in intimate partner relationships, which is why we speak of how personal and intimate it is. Now, our call to action as a starting point as the Ministry of Youth and Gender Affairs is that realization. It's that appreciation that it is between you and me, One, the way we relate with each other, the perceptions that we have around mental health, the perceptions that we have around patriarchy, around culture, around relationships. It starts with me as an aunt to my nephews, how I'm raising them, and to you as a parent, how we raise our children to say, do we say that men are more superior than women? Boys are more superior than girls? Do we allow boys to be boys and cry and be vulnerable? Or do we cage them in an environment that leaves them basina kubakalelanting e ba hella e le gore ba hella ba khokhontsha bomme e le kgang ya gore ga gona go ba ka ikuelang teng kana ga ba rutiwa ka ha ba ka sekasekang le go itshwara ka teng so kgang e tona regarding gender-based violence is that it is indeed a national emergency, but a national emergency is at different levels. Indeed, there's the ministerial level, there's policy level, there's presidential level, there's global level. However, because we are taking a route of preventative measures, a preventative approach where we say, mapodisi a teng, ba justice ba teng, civil society organizations are there, shelters definitely needing more are there. We have a response system to gender-based violence, and what we desperately need is a preventative approach to say in the way that we behave with each other in our personal spaces and professional spaces, we all take this as a priority to ensure that we inculcate a culture that is conducive for mental health, a culture that is conducive for gender equality, so that we can curb this issue.
So let me see if I'm getting this. What I think I'm understanding is your call is for all of us to play our part.
Please.
Okay. All right. What has been said in the recent past, I think every time there's a state of uneasiness, a state of dis-ease, then we look for a nearest escape or figure to attribute it to. It has been said that you have not come through, you're a bit quiet. And I saw from also the responses from your call out this morning, we seem to be thinking, no, but you should. You've been quiet. Let's speak to that, where there has been commentary that is saying, Minister of Gender, Why have you not heard you say anything after they said what 19 murder cases, 60? I can't remember the exact figures that came out just last week, I think. Yeah.
Speaking of those figures, as the ministry, we are actually awaiting the publishing of the official figures, which is set to be published on Monday. It's not even to not realize that even if they are standing at 92 as they are, that it's not enough for us to act. It is. Yeah. It is. Kore, we are striving for zero violence. So any amount possible requires us to take that action. The ministry it's an ever-working machine. It is an ever-working machine that has so many aspects to it, including the civil society organizations, including churches, including Bohosi. So this issue is something that we do take as a priority.
Yeah. You know what I want to perhaps paint out to Botswana? The Ministry of Youth and Gender, specifically the gender function.
Yes.
What is the structure of that the government function?
This gender department under the ministry plays, you can call it an oversight role. Yeah. It is the anchor of all gender issues. It facilitates various institutions, governmental, private, NGOs, legal frameworks. It is a vast machine that anchors and that ensures collaboration between different institutions. Yeah. I'll give you an example. One of the things that we're prioritizing is the Interministerial Committee. Gender-based violence. Really Ministry of Youth and Gender Affairs, mo department ya gender. Really no see. I do not shy away from saying that.
Starting with gender mainstreaming,
yes,
before we get to
mainstreaming is
yeah.
everything. Yeah. Mainstreaming is everything. When we speak of gender-based violence, automatically we speak of gender equality, right. And this is something that needs to be implemented in every level. But now when we even speak of violence, there are different aspects to it. Some of the partnerships that we will most certainly be exploring and implementing more vigorously, for example, is that with the Ministry of Health, to say the root cause of gender-based violence, currently one of them at the highest level is mental health. So we need a stable environment of mental health. It prioritizes men's mental health, because it is indeed a priority and a leading cause of gender-based violence. We have issues of, like I mentioned, inculcating a culture. This is where we now partner with the Ministry of Child Welfare and Basic Education to say, ne ba tsaye karolo mo kganyeng e ba re thusa gore re rute bana culture e harologaneng mo go e re itseng. We know that our traditional practices, our patriarchal culture contributes significantly to this issue, just the lack of equality. And that's something that you cannot change overnight, unfortunately. And so we have various partnerships, including that with the justice system, and all of these communities and ministries and NGOs, all of us are collaborating to ensure that we work towards ending gender-based violence. But I repeat, we also need to see how personal it is.
All right. So then, as the anchor of all efforts or all action, gender being the ministry in the gender affairs department, then how accessible? What is your what does your reach look like? Yes, the ministry is right here, Mogaborone.
Yes,
but we don't get violated, Mogaborone hela. We don't get issues of equality, equity, parity, and all our efforts, Mogaborone hela. What is your spread like?
Let me start by acknowledging that I do wish we had a much bigger department. The Department of Gender currently stands at 124 across the country, which is not enough. We have 72 program staff, and then we have 52 support staff, and corporate services, which means that as the department alone, we're not enough to tackle it. 152 is far from enough. Which is why we then play an oversight role. I do assure Botswana, however, that this is one of the priorities. As the anchor and the beginning of all things gender affairs and all things gender equality, we need to be equipped enough and resourced enough to facilitate it. ke bua ke tsena go leboga le go lemoga ba ileng gore ba ira tiro on the ground. We have so many organizations that are doing the work on the ground. We partner with different organizations. Ke simolole ka go lemoga bogosi. Re nna re bua ka kgang ya ngwao and tradition and so on and so forth. Re na le bogosi bo ileng gore are truly passionate and implementing gender equality in their own spaces. The Khosi di tshwana le Khosi Tshwane, Khosi Somolekai at G West, they're actively working towards assisting us, and we constantly and consistently partner with them. We have different NGOs as well on the ground, and hakere we have them kana khangen na gone gore but lona lirang.
They're doing that effort.
That effort is financed by the Department of Gender and facilitated by the Department of Gender. We also have the Gender Commission, which plays an advisory role to say, on the ground, the social workers under local government, the NGOs, this is how you as government can assist in facilitating them. Because we understand how intimate it is. Ha iragale hela ko Ministry of Youth kana mo gaborone kana mo BTV iragala ko magaeng ko dikgotleng go gontse re buang ka yone. And so we do have partnerships at all levels with different stakeholders ba ileng gore ba re thusa gore re kgone go implement our goal towards gender equality.
And this is this government is anchored on the respect and upholding of human rights. And I want to come just there. You know, the legal framework, how the legal framework is making the national response possible.
Yes.
How is it that the legal framework, what do we have in place that is trying to drive towards this total elimination? Because there's one thing for these different efforts to be in place, but where a right is violated, it is protected by law.
It's very important. So there are two aspects to tackling gender-based violence, as we've been saying. Preventative, the responsive one, and that's where the legal frameworks come. We have various acts. The Penal Code is one which I believe that most enforcers find to be the best to use ka gore na le stricter penalties. Me ga so ne hele lenting. Re na le Bill Act e leng gore ya re ha ile gore kwena o khontshitsweng o na le tshono ya go ka bua gore nya ba gaetso kana motho go gontshitsa ha consideriwa for bail. Gore kana e bela go ntsha motho wa go lalang ampolaile ba gaetso. That's what the Bill Act says. We also have the Sexual Offenders Registry Act, which thought that the goal ke gone gore ha re tswa mo Decembering yana go nne go nnile le bana ba ba re ipilweng le ba ba bolailweng re batla go ba itse e re ba tsena into society because this act doesn't allow them to be working with persons living with disability, with children, so on and so forth, with vulnerable communities to ensure that they're protected. We also have the Cybercrime and Computer-Related Crimes Act. The Anti-Human Trafficking Amendment Act, and so on and so forth. But with all of these, we have found gaps. We have found gaps in implementation. We have found gaps where our implementers feel like is a penal code instead of this because your it's much more stricter, and so on and so forth. But one thing I can attest to is that our justice system, knowing the law, are doing it from a good space to say a very important thing to note, having reflected on the various gaps that these laws have, the goal is to enact the Gender-Based Violence Act. Is filling in the gaps between all of these acts that are currently not being fully implemented.
I'm going to interrupt you a bit because in the Parliament you're facing the motion that the Parliament took a position on, which was speaking to a section in the Criminal Procedures and Evidence Act.
Indeed.
While we're still on the legal framework. So how this, what is in that Criminal Procedures and Evidence Act? That position of Parliament was that it actually makes it swifter for those that have fallen victim to get justice.
Yes. Yeah. So this particular section that was discussed in the motion in Parliament, in summary, Lesego faces a threat or indeed violence or assault. Whether it's physical or not, whether it was in private or not, I shall go to the magistrate court, at which point the magistrate shall hear my case and offer me that protection.
Okay.
Emma. Protection e re ra gone gore the magistrate will then cause whoever the perpetrator is to be arrested and brought to justice.
Right.
Emma.
Okay, so basically that is what it pronounces.
Yes,
that,
so it
yes, in sort of the rigmarole, the usual process, this
Yes.
can be expedited like that.
Indeed.
Okay.
The current state of affairs is that you can go to the magistrate court.
Okay.
Bleeding currently ke bolelle Batswana ke ba sedimosetse gore ha ke le Lesego Chombo la ke se Lesego Chombo o le one o ka ya kwa ga mmaka strata gompieno wa re ba gaetsho motho o mpiditse kana ke a gogontshiwa kana ke na le a threat.
Because when the threat is active,
Yes.
sometimes the process we end up
Becomes
losing
longer.
lives during the process.
Indeed. But we as the Department of Gender Affairs have indeed verified, because we are committed to this cause. We're committed to ending violence. And so we have taken it upon ourselves to verify with the Ministry of Justice, in charge of the magistrates and so on and so forth. But we've also taken a chance to verify it personally. Ala go nthusa
Kana la gore police report
kana la
e
gore ya ko police.
Right.
Mme ka jalo there is a structure. The motion that was in Parliament was to specifically set peace desks, and it was rejected on the basis that it seems it's not necessarily called a peace desk, but indeed when you do go to the magistrate court and you are on oath re ra hela gore ebe o kwadile o ikanne gore go iragetseng kana o reeditswe la ise gore ke go kwala. Mme when we speak of expediting our processes and creating a better conducive environment for survivors and victims, one thing that we would like to push for is a one-stop shop.
Yeah, we've had courts, we've had police stations, the service center being adjusted to deal with the sensitivity of gender-based violence. You are calling on us to play our part today. I am sounding very much like I'm rounding up because I am. The time is unfortunately not on our side. But having said all this, that at policy level, there's instruments in place. At national level, there is, and there perhaps are areas of the
growth for sure.
Areas of growth, but the areas of policy framework that we are failing to access because maybe we're not aware of. Yes. That was a sentiment that you shared at some point. Let's wrap it then. Today, in this state that is seemingly the state of emergency. Some have called it that. There was a lady that went.
It is indeed a state of emergency.
A state of emergency, calling for a state of emergency. What are we saying to the nation as your part, in short, in this platform? Yeah.
I am going to start by being thankful. I know how everything that is currently going on with the noise seems very negative. But if there's anything I appreciate about it is that Botswana are aware and alive to the realities of our country. I will definitely applaud them for that. Botswana are passionate about change. And Botswana are hopeful. You know, when you get someone say, what are you doing? They have hope for a better tomorrow. And that is something that I would like to express my gratitude for. And I would also like to give assurance.
Okay.
We share the same heartbreak.
Right.
We have sisters, we have nieces, we have mothers, we have brothers who are also facing violence. And so this is indeed on a much more personal note to say it is an issue that we're all passionate about, that we're all working towards. And the sooner we realize that a state of emergency, the sooner we realize that this national emergency operates at different levels and that you have a voice that is so valid. The same voice that you're able to be pushing a narrative right now about whether or not government is doing enough is the same voice that could have so much impact towards perpetrators. The same voice that can give hope to victims, to survivors. The same voice that you can use with your networks, with your capacity, with your funds to take action against gender-based violence.
And thank you, Honorable Minister, for coming through.